So what are your thoughts?
My
USC,
thoughts?
UCLA, now in the Big Ten. Rutgers been in for 4 or 5 years.
Yes. A little while.
So you're an established Big Ten school now, let's say.
Yeah.
West Coast now in the mix. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think they're setting themselves up for like a minor league football league.
Okay.
Right, so the NFL really doesn't have a feeder league. You know, the XFL is coming and going.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think with the NIL, is that right? NIL? NIL,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And paying players.
Right.
I think the bigger their pool now, the more leverage they're going to have to really, pull something together.
Yeah. The NIL, that's probably a whole nother. That's another podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
And that might include a couple of beers because not to go down that path, but I've even seen some coaches now coming out and saying, "Yeah, I don't know, maybe this wasn't the greatest idea."
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll delve into that later.
Yeah.
So with USC and UCLA on the docket to enter the Big Ten. And I have no say in this matter whatsoever, but I'm thinking at least 2 more West Coast schools have got to join because you're not going to fly out there.
Yeah, no
just
question.
for 2 schools.
For 2, yeah.
So is it Washington, Oregon? Is it somebody else? What do you guys think?
I mean, it'd be cool to have Washington join, I think. I mean, I'm out that way a decent amount for work and stuff like that, so it'd just be kind of fun to be able to catch a game on both ends of it or go see Purdue playing Washington when I'm out there.
Is there some strategy to make sure? Oregon's a big school.
Yeah.
They have decent football and basketball program, but you have the Nike connection.
No question.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah, very strategic having Oregon in there, right?
Yeah.
Phil Knight and the folks over there at Nike, you want them in your league.
I would think.
When this thing shakes out, right? There's probably going to be these super leagues, and you want to have a team like Oregon, their connections, with you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if that drops, then, of course, the big question mark is what happens in South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
It's interesting, again, right? The TV contract or whatever they've been holding out on, traditionally, I think all that stuff is kind of going away, right? And NBC, like I think you said, signed with the Big East, so are the Big Ten now.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see what they're waiting for now.
Yeah.
What would be their reasoning will be interesting to figure out.
Because TV contracts are now starting with the letter B.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just a shit ton of money in stake. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. I'm excited, I think.
Yeah.
Change is good, right? Maybe.
Can be. It can be.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Is this thing on? All right, kids. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Summits Podcast. Thank you for joining us wherever you get your podcasts, or if you guys are watching here on the Heroes Foundation YouTube channel, thank you. Today's guest, if you haven't already figured out, is Mr. Gary Brackett. Gary, welcome to the Summits Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. For those who may not know who you are, why don't you give us a quick background on where you're from, kind of the early years of Gary, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Jersey kid. So grew up, born and raised in Jersey, Camden, New Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with Camden, New Jersey.
Not Camden, no.
So they had a record. They were the #1 murder capital of the world. They held that distinction for a number of years.
Somebody's got to be number one.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
But so then we grew up there for about 5-6 years. Then moved to a small town called Glassboro, which is like, now that I'm learning, I'm older, you think like, it's a suburb. It's like, I think there's a difference between like Carmel's a suburbs, like Glassboro's like a town.
Okay.
It was just like just a town, right?
Yeah.
It has a college in there. It's big.
Okay.
So grew up playing sports, loving sports. I had 3 older brothers, 1 younger sister. And I still tell the story like my mom had a drug problem. Like she drugged me everywhere I had to go. Right? So not real drugs, folks. That she used to, So with that, it was choir, it was church. She was an ordained reverend.
Okay.
So just very active childhood. Just always out, always on the go, playing sports. And I guess when I got to high school, I realized like my best sport was baseball.
Okay. I was going to ask you, of the sports you played growing up, and not to go into what you ended up doing, but was there a sport that stood out from the others that you liked the most as a kid?
So baseball was cool, but then as you got older, it was like less, action.
Right.
Everyone's not hitting anymore. You're getting pitches that are really good.
Yeah.
You're getting on base. No one's hitting you home.
Yeah.
Right? It's very lonely out there, right?
Right.
So football, when I really started to understand, like, you can hit people and not get in trouble, right? I was like, this
could be fun.
I might be onto something.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of stuck with football and just always was an aggressive kid. Like I said, 3 older brothers, so I was always playing.
You're always in a fight.
Yeah, and I was always playing up.
Yeah.
So for me, like when I played at my level, I always had that aggression.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So so from there, played football. Unfortunately, didn't get a scholarship to college. Undersized, right? Is what they say.
Sounds
right?
familiar.
Yeah. So then I walked on at Rutgers.
Yep.
And it was like a recruited walk-on position. So
Okay.
they knew about me.
Yeah.
But when I got there, they weren't playing any favorites, right? I had to earn my spot. And unfortunately, I tell the story because it kind of really, we all have moments in our life, and I think that make like a huge difference, like an inflection point, if you will.
Right.
And this one moment, my father called me and was like, "Hey, we don't have tuition money. Like, your tuition is due. We don't have tuition money, right?" So I wasn't on scholarship, so I was paying full tuition.
Yeah.
It was that year when I went to college. All my brothers and sisters moved out. Mom got a raise, dad got some veteran money, so everything's right. So I had to pay full tuition, and unfortunately, they refinanced the house twice in order to pay the first 2 years. So third year they couldn't pay it, and I went to see my position coach, and I can still remember him telling me the story. Like, I walk in the room, he's like, "Hey, I'm looking to let you know I'm gonna recruit players that are bigger and better than Gary Brackett." I'm like, ouch! Like, it feels like
Right.
when your girlfriend breaks up with you, like, I'm a date guy that are cuter, more money. It's like, all right,
That's supposed to motivate me.
yeah.
'Cause I'm
I'm
not
like,
sure it's
what's
doesn't work.
going on here?
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
but then he was like, "Hey, but you work hard and you're first in all the drills, and you give me everything you got. And I wish I had more of you on my team." And somebody just dropped out of school, right? Grades, B average. So we're gonna give you a scholarship. And that moment like changed my life, right? Because I'd have been home, Glassboro, going to our little community college. But then this next moment, I went inside of the weight room. One of the guys were in there. His name was Wesley Robinson. He's like 6'3", 245 pounds, 6% body fat. So just looks like a football player, right?
Yeah.
And then he comes up and he's like, "What's the commotion?" Because I'm happy, high-fiving my friends. So I was like, "Yo, I got a scholarship. I get to stay." And he looked at me in my face and was like, "Scholarship? You should worry about starting." And then in my mind, I was like, starting? Like, I just got I got a meal plan. Like, I was a kid in college, like, trying to borrow meals from people at the meal hall. Like, "Hey, you got some extra swipes?" Like, let me in. So that night I couldn't sleep. I'm just constantly thinking. I'm just like, "You should be the starter. You should be the starter." So then I asked myself the question, like, all right, what will we have to do to be the starter? And then I started creating this list, like, all right, you have to work harder. You have to show up, earlier. You have to stay later. You have to watch film. You have to be more disciplined. You have to stop eating some food. And that next day I committed to that list. And I ended up being a starter. I was a team MVP for 2 years, and now I'm in the Rutgers Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was dope, right? Just that one decision to kind of change the way I thought about things, right? Because I think some of us, if you consider yourself the victim, there's a lot of things to blame. But when you take your power back and you realize, like, hey, what I do, life is happening not to me, but for me. And when I start designing and create my own life, I think that's when my life really started to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So do you tell Wes thank you?
No, so Wes like had a little checkered past, in and out of jail, right? So, but yeah, if I see him, sometimes I tell the story and I say he looked like Tarzan and played like Jane. So I'm just hoping he didn't catch any of those clips. But.
Wes, if you're out there, comment below.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So good career at Rutgers. Finished off well. Then what happened?
Yeah, so then I walk on at Rutgers. Then I was a free agent for the NFL, so I got opportunity. So before the opportunity, I was a business econ, and I wanted to be like a stockbroker, a trader.
Okay.
So I had got a job, through one of our alumni at Rutgers, at Smith Barney, and I was gonna work with them and then train to be a trader, right?
Yep.
Back then on the trading floor, it was like 7% college athletes, right? Just because of the pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
I went to work one day and it was like exhausting trying to come home and train. I'm like, yo, this ain't it, right? So then I called the guy the next day, like, yo, I'm gonna train for this NFL thing, right? He's like, NFL, you? I was like, yeah, man, I don't know, I might have a shot. So I worked out, man. I got picked up as a free agent with the Indianapolis Colts back in 2003. Okay. And, you know, I was able to make an impression on Coach Dungy, played special teams primarily my first 2 years, but then my third year was a starter and started for the next 6 years. So I had a 9-year career with the Colts. Had a lot of fun. Captain, Super Bowl team. Yeah. You know, a lot of different events. Was able to afford me a lot of different things. Started my own foundation. You know, giving back to folks with cancer. So that's why it's near and dear to my heart. And I love what you guys are doing. So, just grateful, right? Just right place, right time, and put the right amount of work in to kind of set me up with the opportunity to be successful.
Yeah. So, a question on that: when guys come out of college, they don't get drafted. They come in as a free agent and they get picked up by a team.
Right.
Is it, I don't say normal, but is it pretty common for them to their way onto a team is through special teams?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because most teams look at special teams as like a third, like offense, defense, special teams.
Sure.
So it's a huge part of the game in terms of field position. So yeah, special teams. But the challenge becomes most of these guys never play special teams.
That was my follow-up question. Is like,
because they're starters.
We all go through this. Like, you're going from grade school to high school. Like, you might have been the man in 8th grade.
Right.
Now you're a freshman. You're starting all over again. Go from high school to college, starting all over again. To your point, either they've never played special teams, or they haven't since high school or whenever, and they're like, you know, in college they were above that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I don't play special teams.
They
didn't want to risk me getting injured, you know, on a punt return.
Right.
So now that's their way in.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes on up here.
Yeah, it's like I think it's an Abraham Lincoln quote. Like a lot of opportunity to miss because they look like overall and it looks like work.
Yeah,
and I think so funny story. So I get there, and the first week was like first couple days was bad, right? So I'm like 4th string defense, not getting in. I'm 3rd string special teams, and the only problem is like there's no 4th string defense, there's no 3rd string special teams in the NFL, right? Yeah. So it's just like I'm on these lists, I'm not getting in. So it was like a scout team, kickoff team. Brandon Hicks, I never forget. He was like a 3 or 4 year guy from Bowling Green. And he didn't want to run down on kickoff. He was like, man, I don't want to run down. You put a beanie on your head, you run down. Call like dummy cards. You just do whatever the card says. Okay. So I was like, I run down for you. He's like, really? Like really? Like who wants to like be on a scout? Let alone special team. Let alone scout team special team.
Right.
I was like, hell yeah. I'm like, I ain't doing nothing at practice. Yeah. I'm like, I gotta do something. So I put the beanie on. I'm like, yo, this is it. So they kicked the ball off, and I just took a whoosh. I ran past the guy in the front line who was supposed to block me, ran down, make the play. I was like, who the hell? Where'd you come from? So I give my position. So now the starting guy was like, hey, 58, slow down. I was like, nope. He gave me the sign. I shook it off like, I'm not slowing down. So he was like, all right. So he puts his helmet on. He was like, all right, this is how we want to go. I'm like, yeah, this is how we're going to go. So next time, same thing. So this time I know he comes running at me. And this thing on special teams, what kills me about football is like, I'm paid to get the guy with the ball.
Right.
Okay. If you don't have the ball, I was never interested in really hitting you.
Right.
Yeah. So I ran to him like I was going to hit him, so he's bracing for impact, and then I just slid right past him.
Right.
He missed again, right down. What the? Somebody block him. So that next day, kickoff team, I was scratched out, and I was like number 2 kickoff bracket.
Nice.
Right? So like, just give me one shot, right?
Yeah.
I made the most of it, man. Then, I got recognized, and after that, I started kickoff my first year. Then after that, it was like, hey, this kid could play.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
How did things progress from special teams into getting into the linebacker rotation?
Yeah, so when I was I was always like a natural born leader, so to speak. Okay. I was always like probably one of the best players on my team, so I always was a captain role and understood what that meant in regards to like. I wasn't one of those captains, do as I say, not as I do. I was like, yo, follow me. Yeah. That's the best speech I ever gave, right? Follow me. So for me, playing hard on special teams, then on scout team defense, like I would play hard as well, and they would recognize me.
Right.
And then Coach Meeks at the time, our defensive coordinator, was like, yo, this kid is fast. Like, we need the speed on 3rd down. Like, we're getting killed on 3rd down.
Right.
So they started playing me on some spot roles on 3rd down, and then I started like making plays, interceptions, batting the ball down, and they're looking like like we got an athlete, like a linebacker position, and Rob Morris, he was a first round pick, great dude, but he was like a thumper. He's gonna come down here and hit you in the mouth. I wasn't gonna hit you, right? I was gonna tackle you, get you down, but I was gonna make a play.
Yeah,
and they saw that, and they recognized that, and then during my second season, I actually started some games because it was like, you'll play Tom Brady. They're starting off with 3 or 4 wide receivers, and you want to put your athlete, so to speak, on the field. Yeah. So after that, they were like, "Yo, I think we can win with him."
Yeah, that also fit well with Tony Dungy's scheme. He wanted speed versus size per se. Yep, and that kind of fit well with his defense.
Yeah, cover 2, right? So cover 2, my responsibility was like 30 to 40 yards down the railroad tracks, right? So the hashes of the field, my responsibility was to get down in there. So I was quick enough to get there, but also smart enough to recognize what the offense was doing and how to kind of like take advantage of some of those things.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate all that you did for the Colts, and especially in 2006. That was that was a nice year.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Won a Super Bowl. It was a great experience. I tell people it was like, how it was playing in front of all those people. It's just like it's a regular season game with the whole world watching.
Yeah.
Right. So just you go out there, do your job, man, and had some adversity, but fought through it, man. Came home, got that trophy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Quick little story. Super Bowl party, obviously, like everybody else had in Indy. Opening kickoff, the Bears run it back.
Yeah.
And there may or may not have been a TV in the house that got broken within the first 3 minutes of the game. It probably wasn't the only TV in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the game turned out the way it did.
So funny story. So like it's a third, right? So I was an old special teams guy, so I respect these guys. So during leading up to the game, we're like, yo, don't kick it to Devin, like offensive defense handler. But the special teams guys like, yo, I get paid too. Like, yo, kick it to him. I want to do my job on that TV. So we're all like, all right, man, let's see. After you ran it back, like, no more kickoffs. So I don't think we kicked it to him again after that.
Pretty smart. Yeah. Well, hey, Gary, September is Leukemia and Lymphoma Awareness Month, as you know. What is your cancer story?
Yeah, so unfortunately, like when I made it to the league my first year, I had quite a bit of adversity. My father passed in October. He was a Vietnam vet, Marine. He just had several complications. So unfortunately, that February, my mom went into the hospital for a routine surgery, and unfortunately, she also passed away. She had a stroke on a recovery table. Wow. During that time, my brother was sick, Greg, and the crazy story was Greg was 3 years older than me, but we were both 5'10". We were both very athletic. We looked the same. And I tell the story that was always great for me because essentially when he turned 21, I turned 21.
Yeah.
So, right.
Got the hand-me-down ID.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but he had got diagnosed with T-cell neuroblastula leukemia and very aggressive form. So several bouts of chemo. First bout, he beat it. Then it came back even more aggressive. At this point, he needed a bone marrow transplant. So it was my second season in the NFL. I lost my mom, my dad, and my brother needs a bone marrow transplant. So I'm his donor. Again, we look just alike, and it's like doing my second year training camp. So it's like now I have an opportunity to like earn my spot. And training, I'm ready for it. And it was like I got the call from the hospital, Robert Wood Johnson, New Jersey. It was like, yo, this is now or never. Like, this is the window we have to come in and get your bone marrow. Like, you gotta be here next week. So I talked to Coach Dungy, and he really meant it when he talked about, faith, family, and football. So I explained it to him. He was like, go. Like, there's nowhere else I want you to be.
No questions. Yeah.
So I went and I gave my brother a bone marrow transplant, and it's crazy because when you're there, it sucked. Like, I would get numerous shots and to build my white cells so they can extract, what they needed to kind of give him. So mine was like the blood transfusion where they took the white cells out of my right arm. Okay. They ran it through the machine, and then they put the red cells back in my left arm. Okay. But still 2 days, and because of my size, my density, my body mass, they're like, I think you got to take 3 times the shots of Neupogen in order for you to like really start producing these white cells. So it was just like injecting the flu to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just, woe is me, it's bad. But then after I did my transfusion, I went and saw my brother in the room getting treatment in the cold room. had a gown on. He had to open up to get treatment, and then you just realize like how severe this is. Before my brother, like I heard of cancer, but it never really impacted me.
Right.
And then after you have that situation, you just learn more and more about the impacts of cancer, not only on that individual but on their entire families.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you did the bone marrow transplant, that was when?
That was 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how long did that take effect with your brother at that
so
time?
he after the transplant, he actually never was able to recover.
Okay.
So I think they have a thing, graft versus host.
Okay.
Where the transfer doesn't really take, or it takes, but it's like a very aggressive, right? Because you're introducing someone else's DNA essentially inside your body to kind of reproduce. And so the cancer was in remission. So it worked, but his body wasn't strong enough to take it at the time. So unfortunately, he passed away. So in 16, 18 months, I lost my dad, my mom, my brother, my last one to cancer. So, 4 kids. So I kind of stepped in to be their surrogate father, at the ripe age of 24. So, and there's still like lingering effects of, kids losing their parent at a young age.
Sure.
And what that means, for them and their trajectory of their life.
Yeah.
So,
how old were the kids at the time?
Yeah. So at the time they were probably like 11, 10, like 6 and 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So, his son lived with me on 2 different occasions. The youngest son, just trying to help out where I could. But yeah, it's challenging, right? Anytime you lose a loved one to cancer and the impacts that kind of have. And I mean, now I love aunts and uncles to cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So you realize how big of a issue it is, right? And how major this is of a disease and why important it is for foundations like yours to raise funds for treatment. And my foundation raised funds to help them, not necessarily for treatment, but for mainly like events and things like that. Thank you events. We got Field of Dreams events and things like that. But I think, it just wrecks a family sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
We talk about cancer being like the ultimate non-discriminatory disease because it affects everyone, regardless of sex, gender, race, religion, nationality. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy in that regard. I almost respect it. I say that sometimes. People are like, "What, you respect cancer?" I go, "I don't respect cancer, but I respect in the fact that it doesn't discriminate who it affects. So we're all in this together, per se. So I think we all have some sort of a duty, if you will, to do what we can to try to prevent this thing.
Yeah.
And battle what's in front of us. Kind of like what you did on the football field. I mean, there's some similarities there in terms of battling through getting into the starting rotation, just like your brother battled his own battle. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But what did we learn from that? What can we do to try to, to save the next Greg?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're all doing. I know you've encountered other patients. What message do you have for cancer patients who are fighting the fight?
So there's like, it's tough, right? Because I don't think this is like true scientific research, but it's definitely neuroscience research that your brain is just so powerful when you attack it in terms of like, if you have the mentality that I'm going to beat this and I'm going to get through this and I'm going to be a testimony, I'm going to share, and it's going to suck and I'm going to embrace it, or are you just going to give up and just think that this is it and this is over? And the patients that I see that want to fight this and they're optimistic, their chances of survival are just much higher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We talk about attitude a lot, and that's exactly what that is. I mean, someone had told me the same thing. So you got to have a positive attitude through it all. I'm like, don't get me wrong. There's days where you're like, this sucks. Like, well, what the hell? But you're right. That attitude, you've got to embrace it to really fight through. This sounds really kind of corny, but when I was a freshman at IU, it was a pledge at a fraternity, and we were going through certain things.
Yeah.
You know, some guys handled it better than others, but we're like, hey, if so-and-so, I'm not saying names, if so-and-so can get through this, you can get through it. You're just fine.
Yeah.
But it's funny how, like, when I went through my experience, I kind of relayed that to myself and said, hey, I know other people who have gotten through this. Mm-hmm. Get your ass through this.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Mm-hmm. And I think I heard Deion say this, and he talked about he pulled his team up, and he was like, "Hey guys, I want you to do something for me today." He was like, "When you go out there and work hard, I don't want you to do it for you." He was like, because time and time again we'll quit on ourselves. Time and time again we'll fall short for ourselves. It was just us, right? But do it for that one person that you love. Do it for that one person that got you to where you are today. Mm-hmm. And when you think of it like that, right, it's like some person, whether your kids, your wife, your parents, there's somebody you won't quit on. So if you keep them in mind when you're fighting things like that, it just helps out that much better. Because for ourselves, we're just like, I tried it, right? It's little old me. But when we think about someone else, it's just like,
right,
it's too soon.
Yeah.
We think about in the old Oak and Bucket game. Do it for the bucket.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I think. Whenever that comes up, or whenever it goes up.
What's the record between the Oak and Bucket game? Is there?
I don't think
it's close, right? It's almost. Is it even?
I should know this. I don't know the answer.
I would venture to guess that it's more in IU's camp than it is Purdue. Yeah. Didn't we lose the last 2 years? Right. Even though we should have won last year. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
But
they came back and beat you?
Yeah.
I went to the game last year when Rutgers played IU.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you guys won last year.
We did win last year. Oh, Chris pulling up. Here we go.
Look at this.
There we go.
Wow.
Oh, look at that. There we go.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm totally off. I would have
75 to 42 Purdue.
Wow.
Come on, Hoosiers. The hell.
I mean, it should make you feel better. I didn't know.
Who is Rutgers' biggest rival in football?
Yeah.
Or in general?
Yeah. It was like Temple.
Okay.
Like when we're back Big East, you know, two local close schools.
Because Temple's in Philly, correct?
Yeah, Temple's in Philly, but that was our closest school. But because we were historically bad, like you got to win games to have a rival, right?
Yeah.
It has to be like the other team. When I would play for the Colts, Jaguars, like, yeah, we're rivals. I'm like, nah, you're our little kid brother. We're like, we kick your guys' ass. Like, it's not a rival. We're a rival with the Patriots. Like, we're back and forth.
Yeah.
Exactly. Not so much. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that. So one of our sales managers on the for-profit side is a Rutgers grad.
Okay.
Very proud Rutgers
Smart
grad.
guy.
Yeah.
Ivy League.
One of the few cars driving around Indy with this big red R on the back. And
I like it.
I know who that is.
Exactly.
So we go to the Rutgers IU game last season down in Bloomington, and IU did not exactly have the season that we thought we were going to.
Yes.
And it was not very far in the game, and I was just like, all right, I owe you at least a couple of beers at this point. What? And I think it was the weather was not. It was cold. It was rainy. Not a great day. And I think at halftime I was ready to go. I stuck it out for the third quarter, but then it was like you guys scored another 2 touchdowns maybe, and I was like, you can stay. I'm out.
Yeah. That's funny. I had my little boy with me on the sideline, and he was trying to tough it out. I was like, bro, this is miserable out here. Like,
wait, which sideline were you on?
Of course, the Rutgers, the winning sideline.
That's fair.
The correct one.
Yeah, the correct side.
Yeah.
So I always speak to the team like before the game.
Okay.
So I spoke to them before the game. It's funny, like, I guess, was it 3 years ago? I left because IU was like whooping Rutgers.
Okay.
And I left at like halftime. And then Rutgers came back. It was like a huge comeback.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That's
awesome.
awesome.
Add that into the to the mix.
All right. Well, I guess it'll be not this season, but the next time that Rutgers comes into Bloomington, we'll make sure you let me know if you're going down there.
Yes, I will
coordinate the tailgate.
I like it.
Whatever happens.
I'll borrow a Rutgers jersey if you have one.
Yes.
Okay.
I get you.
I'll refrain from saying what I was going to say. Well, Gary, what advice? We talked about this already a little bit, but what advice if you're going to visit kids at Riley, you're going to see other maybe adult patients? What other message do you try to instill in them in terms of what they're going through? I mean, we talked about attitude. That's certainly probably the biggest thing. But is there anything else that you would we want to tell them?
Yeah, I think for me, being empathetic to those people that and what they're going through.
Yeah.
And what stories they tell themselves. But and this sounds crazy, but I wholeheartedly believe this. Like the man cried he had no shoes until he met the man with no feet. So even when like we're dealing with our worst, there's someone out there that has it worse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you have that perspective, like I have for a number of years had this luncheon, Tender Heart Luncheon, and it was for moms because moms always a lot of times bear the brunt of kids being sick and with the patients. So just a day to give them a moment and kind of honor them. And, you know, moms are there. One kid has cancer, you know, it's been back and forth to the hospital. And then she's at a table with a mom who has 2 kids with cancer. One has tumors. One has, and you just hear the stories of how, like, so moms come out there grateful. It's just saying, like, if we all were sitting around the table and we threw all of our issues in the middle of the pile and we saw everyone's issue, we will gladly grab our issues back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just like,
Right.
just being, you know, grateful for your opportunity is just like, and that doesn't mean everyone's a great one. You know, someone just like, you know, you get things in your life so you could be a testimony. Like you beating cancer, like how many lives have you impacted as a result of that? And sometimes, you know, I think I wholeheartedly believe that like God gives us stuff as battles to us as braver soldiers. And I think, you know, your testimony or what you do after you get through, I think it just speaks volumes of like the character that you know someone has. So it's hard hearing it in a moment because they're in the thick of things. But I just know that every storm eventually runs out of rain.
Yeah. Well said.
And you just have to be there long enough to survive it to really come out the other side and be better off for what you went through.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a couple of props you brought with you.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about those.
So third book, kind of write books in my free time. Now, but this book was important for me. It's called 30 Days of Diversity. Just talks about diversity and inclusion and how we could be more welcoming to people and their ideologies, their, you know, what they identify as. You know, every time we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's always like race. But it's so much bigger than race in terms of like gender, identity, you know, ageism. There's so many different things that we deal with. So there's like a book and a workbook. Now, you know, I get to speak a lot for a living.
Yeah.
But with 3 kids, you know, sometimes it's challenging to speak. So now I can put it in books and platforms. Now I can kind of sell those things and get people, you know, brought up to speed on, you know, some of the things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd imagine the shift to more virtual meetings assisted you in helping to reach a wider audience.
Yeah, that was great. I think when it first started, I think everyone wanted to be like out there and have a virtual meeting. I think for the last few months, at least, it feels like people have been burnt off.
The
whole Zoom.
It's a fine balance now, right?
Pajama pants and shirt and tie top. But I think it really just shows you the potential that we have in the world, just as business owners, and how like something like this, like before, this message was potentially just local, right? And you'd have big events. But now with podcasts, with cameras and microphone, this is a global message.
Sure.
Like anyone can hear this and see what you're doing and can potentially like come in and pitch in or help out in some type of way. So just the beauty of the times, right? Like what you're able to accomplish. And I always say it's not an advantage unless you take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no advantage that we have over the people in the 1950s and 40s if we don't have mics and video and we don't take advantage of it and document some of the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
No, well said.
Yeah.
Any questions you have for us?
No, just so the podcast. How long have you guys been doing this podcast?
We started in
April of last year.
So
April of last year.
Year and a half-ish, a little over a year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what have you learned? Like what aha moments have you had?
A lot.
So
two biggest things I've learned. One is I really enjoy it. Like I wasn't sure, and the very first night we did
two in a row, and it was in the evening.
Yeah, it was late. I literally had just driven back from spring break, came in here that night. We knocked out our first 2 episodes. You know, I had no experience.
Yeah,
and our second one was remote too, so it was we tackled both our first 2 podcasts and a remote one.
Yeah, and I remember it was like 9 or 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
And I should have been like just dead tired, but like that was awesome. Like
Yeah.
I could do one more if we had another guest.
Yep.
So that for sure. I just really enjoy doing it. The second thing is I'm just not that good, and I freely admit that. Each episode I watch, I'm like, all right, you did this well, but you need to work on that, or you work on this, and stop saying all the time, and just little bits and pieces.
There'll always be the filler words. That's what Chris is for. He's supposed to edit those out
exactly.
for you.
True.
Yeah.
It's true.
Good editor.
Yeah.
And I think being good is subjective. But the beautiful thing, you didn't let your thoughts and story of you saying that you're not good stop you from doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people never get started.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have him to thank for that.
Right.
So we talked about that beforehand.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
like, when he started asking, I was like, I don't know. And then we ultimately came to the conclusion we want to do this, but if we're going to do it, let's not half-ass it. Right?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey had a video that went out yesterday talking about his dad saying not half-ass it. My dad used to always use that term with me all the time. But that was the same thing. Let's not half-ass it when we do this. And when I hear people who watch either this one or another one we've got that says, "Oh yeah, I caught that episode. That was great," I'm like, then it's like, oh, that feels good.
Yeah,
all right, we're doing something right.
Yeah.
If somebody took away something from it, or we have guests who say, you know what, I was really nervous about doing this, especially because it's video too.
Yeah.
If it was just audio, they can kind of hide behind the microphone. But especially if those who've been really affected, they say, you know what, that was very therapeutic.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, not just do the listeners maybe get something out of it, but if the guests got something out of it, then it's worth doing.
Yeah, even if nobody watched it, talking to one of the guests that said, we've had a couple guests that have said they've never told this story like that before, end to end, and kind of came away thinking that it helped them in some portions. Like if nobody saw it, that alone was worth it. Or I know there was somewhere loved ones hadn't heard the story from the person's perspective who was telling it, or hadn't heard it in that way, and it just gave them a new perspective on what either they went through, or them as a family or a friend, or something that they had maybe never even had an idea that they went through it or something. And so I think that's been pretty cool to see. And at the end of the day, if it helps the person on the other side of the table, that's worth it, whether we get 1 view or 1 million views. So
yeah, I think it'd be beneficial, especially like every year it affects so many different people, and when people are newly diagnosed, I always get the question like, what should I do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think we grow up in a society where our common gesture is like, if you need anything, like ask me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that puts so much pressure on the person who actually needs something.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially like when you have cancer, when you're fighting cancer in your family, the last thing you want to do now is be vulnerable and ask for something and be rejected.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, so I think, just hearing the stories of what people go through, and just like for people that are out there, like, how could you proactively help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it is not rocket science. Like, people need food, they need shelter, they need water, like they got kids, they need so some of these things. So I've always, now when I haven't gone through so much adversity, like now it's like I'm so amped to just like want to just support something, or just here you go. It's like, you didn't have to do that. It's just like, no, I would rather you not have to ask for it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So guys, Gary just hit the nail on the head there. To steal, I guess, Nike's term, just do it.
Exactly.
You're 100% correct in that everyone says, well, just let me know if you need anything, I'm there, but don't wait for them to ask, because then they feel awkward asking. They're already in a weird state. Just freaking do it.
Yeah.
If it's laid on your heart and you see someone's doing great work, just support it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't have to ask you to go to a foundation. You know what the mission is. You heard it.
Yep.
Like, and any amount. Like,
right. Oh yeah. It all adds up.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's too little. I won't do. No, that much would be great. I thank you. I'm grateful.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think is that mentality. Just like, I feel like sometimes we play small to ourselves in terms of like, what little old me can do. Like, a lot.
Yeah.
And too often we rely on so few people to do so much lifting, where we all can contribute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Cool. Well, great words to conclude on. Gary, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Summits Podcast.
Yeah. Thank
If you guys make sure you get out there, pick up 30 Days to Diversity. Check out Gary's new book there. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Summits Podcast from wherever you get your podcast. For those of you guys joining us on the Heroes Foundation YouTube channel, thank you for viewing in today. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscription button and click on the little notification bell so you can be alerted when new episodes like this one drop. And don't forget, let's all band together and beat cancer. Thank you.